I grew up in Westport and never spent any time in New Haven. I think I've been in New Haven once in my 60-some-odd years. So it's a great opportunity to be in New Haven and kind of appreciate all it has to offer. My goal tonight is to, for those of you involved in the education venture, especially those of you involved in the public school education venture, if there are some of you here, is to say that there is to advocate for this notion that there is another way. And that essentially we've gotten seduced into this notion that the only way we can improve schools is by this no child left behind, drill and kill kind of mindset. And I'm going to try and advocate for the notion that that may work in some circumstances, but there are other ways to do this school improvement stuff. And I want to kind of suggest what that is and what some of the research is that supports that. However, I'm not really a big advocate for major policy initiatives. I'm more of an advocate for people taking opportunities into their own hands and doing change at the local level. So I love this quote from William James, who said, "I'm done with great things and big things, great institutions and big success, and I am for those tiny, invisible, molecular moral forces that work from individual to individual by creeping through the crannies of the world like so many rootlets or like capillary oozing of water, yet which, if you give them time, will rend the hardest monuments of man's pride." So I want you to think of yourselves as those little rootlets, or as those, those little drops of water that will push up through the pavement and rend the asphalt and change the educational paradigm. I'm going to move this because it's just a little too close. There we go. All right. So I want to look at the role that schools, from early childhood centers to elementary schools to high schools, how they can change the relationship between students and communities in the local environment. That's the big idea. And I'm going to start with this by using an analogy to kind of frame what I want to talk about. So the analogy that I'm going to use, analogies, like foot is to boot as hand is to glove. Good, okay, that's the analogy, okay. So the analogy that I'm going to use tonight is that place-based education is to conventional education, or no child left behind kind of education, as terroir is to fast food. Right, so now I have to kind of define terroir. So terroir is a French term that refers to the unique attributes of a place, the quality of the soil and the environment and the slope of the land, that shape the flavor of the wine that is made from specific grapes. So it's the unique attributes of a place that shape the flavor of the wine. And it's come to mean more broadly the unique attributes of a place that shape the flavor of food. So that foods that have come from different places have distinctive different flavors. So terroir, the distinctness of flavor in relationship to fast food. Fast food is about homogenization. So what fast food is all about is that the McDonald's hamburger that you get in New Haven tastes exactly the same as the McDonald's hamburger that you get in Phoenix, right? You want that kind of consistency. So on the one hand, we've got the kind of uniqueness of character of education. On the other hand, this kind of uniqueness and character of food, homogenized food. So similarly, place-based education is about trying to aspire to education that has a unique character based on the unique attributes of the place where it happens, as opposed to homogenization, which is what the conventional educational paradigm wants us to do right now. So it would be great, right, if the third graders on October 18th were on the same page in the math book in New Haven as they were in Phoenix. That's the direction they want us to go in. They want us to do this homogenization thing. I think that what we want really is not like that at all. And that doesn't mean that we don't have kind of national standards or, you know, Common Core standards. There are things that we all aspire to, but the way we get there should be unique and different in each place. I knew a wonderful Waldorf educator once who said, you know, the way you can tell a really good teacher and a really good classroom is if you walk into a classroom and you see something you've never seen before. Something that's, you know, happening because of the teacher's interest or the kid's interest or the history of that place. That tells you that something interesting is going on. So that's the analogy, and I want to take that analogy and use this notion of a farmer's market. And so the idea here is that schools ought to be more like farmers markets. And so I want to look at what farmers markets are like and then analogize that back to schools, right? Because farmers markets are where the terroir of food starts to show up. So, and the farmers market that I'm going to use as an image is the Brattleboro, Vermont farmers market, which is a great farmers market. If you like going to different farmers markets, Brattleboro's is a great one. But you can use the City Seeds farmers market as an image because it'll apply there as well. So let's think about farmers markets. You go to the farmers markets and you find vegetables that you've never seen before, right? You find in Brattleboro, you find gill feather turnips and you find these weird purple tomatoes. And I remember when garlic scapes started to show up a couple of years ago and I said, what's a garlic scape? You know, I had no idea. So you get these unique kinds of vegetables that are specific to the place and that farmers are trying to do interesting things with. So similarly, what we want in classrooms are these unique things. My partner Jen is here. I'm going to use her for lots of examples tonight. Jen, a couple of years ago, had to do a 6th grade geology unit. You know, you're supposed to teach plate tectonics in 6th grade. And instead of doing plate tectonics, or the way she did plate tectonics, was to teach a unit on slate. Now it happens that Guilford, the town she works in, was the slate capital of Vermont for about 100 years. It's right on a plate tectonic boundary, so that's why the slate got formed there. And she did a unit with her kids that nobody had ever done before. Nobody had ever done a unit on slate, probably in elementary school or middle school in Vermont. But it came about because of the unique aspects of that place, and it was a fantastic way to teach geology. So that's the first piece. The second piece is when you go to the farmer's market, the food that you buy draws you into the stories of the people that grew it. And so you're not just buying disembodied cucumbers. You know, you're buying something that's part of that person's lifestyle. So similarly, we want in education, we don't want to use those textbooks that are made for the big New York and Texas and California markets. We want to be creating materials that are unique to that place. I had a teacher once who said, you know, the 3rd grade social studies textbook, it's about, you know, Arizona. And here I am in Gorham, New Hampshire, foot of the White Mountains. Most of the kids have never been into the White Mountains, even though they've lived in them for all their lives. Why am I not studying the White Mountains? Why am I studying mountains in Arizona? You know, so you want to have curriculum that connects you to the local people, just like the way in which the food in the farmer's market connects you to the local people. So the third aspect of going to the farmer's market is that when you buy food there, you're enriching the local economy. You know, so your dollars are not going out of the community and going into some corporate pockets of people that are employing, you know, underpaid workers. You're paying for your money stays in the community. So similarly, when you're doing place-based education in schools, when you get sophisticated about it, what you're doing in schools starts to have an impact on the local economy. You start to enrich help local businesses market themselves, or help kids create businesses, or help nonprofits with the community improvement projects that they're doing. So, as opposed to this isolation from the community, you're actually supporting the community. The next aspect about farmers markets is that it's a swirl of of young and old people. In Brattleboro, there's the sandbox for the 4-year-olds, and there are the 80-year-old farmers, and there's everybody in between. So similarly, in schools, rather than the age segregation that we get in so many schools, where you've got the classroom teacher or two, and then a bunch of second graders, you want much more of this cross-age. You want, you know, kids of all ages working with each other, and you want community members of different segments of the community at different points in their lives in the classroom. So you want that broad age spectrum as part of the educational team. And then the last aspect is that when you shop at the farmer's market, it's inconvenient and time-consuming. And it's important to recognize that similarly, when you do the kinds of things that I'm going to show you tonight, these kind of place-based education projects, they're going to be time-consuming and more work, and sometimes kind of a pain. I remember the evening that Jen came home. She said, "I hate place-based education." What was that about? What was that about?
The video.
What was when you were working on the video?
Yeah.
Right. When it was so, you know, it's just like it becomes a mess. You know, you can't assign the chapter and have the kids read the questions at the end of the chapter, which you do some of. You know, you're always doing some of that, but then you're doing these other projects, which really make the whole thing much more valuable. So, so we've used the farmer's market as a kind of figuratively here. So what I want to do is start with a nice little PowerPoint piece about a farm-to-school unit that Jen was involved with. It's happened about 3 or 4 years ago. There's wonderful farm-to-school stuff going on in Vermont. It's quite remarkable. It's been shaped a lot by this Junior Iron Chef contest that gets run by the state, where teams of middle school kids and high school kids from all around the state show up in Burlington, and they've got 90 minutes to prepare a dish that's only made with Vermont products. And it's become a really big thing in Vermont, and it's put interesting back pressure onto the farm-to-school programs throughout the state. So this is a farm-to-school program. So this is 6th graders, Guilford, Vermont, a school, a K-8 school of about 160 kids in the southeastern corner, right near where Brattleboro is. Do we need to say anything more about it than that?
No.
Nope.
This is the very beginning. This is like several years ago, so it's really evolved since this point.
about how the Maple Sugar Project has evolved?
We've never built a sugar house, but we're hoping to do it in the next couple of years. Everybody really loves doing it, and we have been raising money for buying our own evaporator, and through a bread business that I've been doing all year with the 7th grade, which has been really fun. So, it's called Broad Brook Bread. It's the brook that runs through the town.
And the sixth graders have been doing the lunch. Are they doing lunch?
Oh, well, by the end of the year, it evolved to, they were making school lunches almost every Friday using local ingredients and purchasing the local food through a kind of a middleman who helps to promote using local foods in the cafeteria. So they got good at, that's why I'm doing a bread business with them, because they got to be so good at it that cafeteria people loved it. So that was really great.
So that's one nice example of using the attributes of the local place to kind of really make for engaged and rich curriculum. So now I want to kind of broaden it out from Guilford, Vermont to across the country and talk about this notion of place-based education and how it's emerged. And so I want to give you the kind of the counterpoint of place-based education. Uh-oh, I lost my quote here. Here it is. Okay. So this is from an article by a guy named Bill Bigelow, and he's describing growing up and going to school in Marin County, north of San Francisco, in the 50s. And it's an article called "How My Schooling Taught Me Contempt for the Earth." It's an ironic title. And he says, I loved the land. I spent every after-school moment and every weekend or summer day outside until it got dark. I knew from long observation at nearby ponds the exact process of a pollywog's transition into a frog and the relative speed of different kinds of snakes, all kinds of other stuff. He says, so how did my schooling extend or suppress my naive earth knowledge and my love of place? Through silence about the earth and the native people, Bel Air Elementary School, perched on the slopes of a steep, golden-grassed hill, taught plenty. We actively learned to not think about the earth or about the place where we were. We could have been anywhere or nowhere. Teachers made no effort to incorporate our vast, if immature, knowledge of the land into the curriculum. Whether it was in the study of history or writing or science or arithmetic or reading or art, school erected a Berlin Wall between academics and the rest of our lives. So it's this notion of the Berlin Wall that gets created between schools and the local environment or the broader social community that we want to get past. And so place-based education is about taking down that wall, and it's the antidote to not thinking about the earth or not thinking about the social community. I love this quote from Comenius, who was a European educator in the 17th century, where he said, knowledge of the nearest things should be acquired first, and then that of those farther and farther off. And if you're familiar with Lucy Sprague Mitchell's kind of young geographer's work at Bank Street in New York City in the 30s, this notion of you start here and then you move outwards, as opposed to teaching the solar system in first grade. I'll have to tell you my favorite solar system story. So the first and second grade teacher at my local elementary school is teaching the solar system to her first and second graders. She's a graduate of my program. I say, Emily, why are you teaching the solar system? You know it's not developmentally appropriate. She says, it's in the curriculum, I got to teach it. So she teaches it in as charmingly appropriate a fashion as possible. Lots of song and dance and movement and chants, and she teaches that kid that mnemonic device about my very excellent mother just served us 9 pizzas, right? That's the first letter, and that each word tells you the order of the planets. There's a little girl in that class called Linnea, friend of my daughter's. My daughter's not in this class. Linnea's in this class. Linnea loves the social studies unit, and she can tell me the names of all the moons of Jupiter. And she knows the mnemonic device, and I'm thinking, maybe I'm wrong about this developmentally appropriate stuff. She loves this social studies stuff, this solar system stuff. So the solar system unit's over. We're flying down to the Caribbean, my family and Linnea's family, and I'm sitting behind Linnea and her mom on the plane, and Linnea leans over to her mom and says, "Mommy, which planet is Mexico on? So that's a good example of what happens, right? When you don't start with what's nearest by, right? Is that kids, first and second graders, don't have the cognitive framework to construct what this solar system thing is all about. Solar systems, planets, or hemispheres. That kind of set inclusion stuff doesn't exist for most first and second graders. So they should be studying what's nearby. So we're going to look at some examples of that. So let's pull up that other. So that's that nice picture from the farmer's market. There's like another thing in there with the ground cherries, right? I'd never heard of ground cherries before.
So good.
What?
They're delicious.
Really good. Yeah, see, like ground cherries? Right, yeah, who's
They
heard of
have a
that?
little papery outside, and then they're juicy, and they taste like something, I can't remember. Yeah, they have a funky taste. They're sweet, but then there's this kind of strange taste
So
to them. They're really good.
these unique
They're
kind
the
of-
ones on the right, the pale color, the second row, the second column on the right,
Yeah.
second from the right.
These little things, so these interesting foods that are shown up. Okay, so definitions. I think Judy's used part of this before. Process of using the local community environment as a starting point to teach all the curriculum. And this is just as a starting point. It doesn't mean that you just stay local, but use it as the entry to moving out. And that the big ideas I want to get at is, using hands-on real-world learning experiences. This approach will improve academic achievement, help students develop stronger ties to the community, enhance their appreciation of the natural world, and create a heightened commitment to serving as active, contributing citizens. And this last idea is really important, that we've lost the notion, the Deweyan notion of the classroom or the school as a laboratory for democracy. And, that's kind of just been left by the wayside in this kind of test stuff. And so we really have to think about schools as providing opportunities for kids to practice being citizens. And then everybody gets confused about, so education for sustainability and environmental education, place-based education, service learning, and how do these things all relate? So this is my attempt to show how these things relate. The big idea is creating sustainable communities. Within a broad social sustainable communities movement, you're going to have an emphasis on developing regional food systems and on affordable housing and on locally owned businesses and lots of other components. But the place-based education piece is the education section of the broader sustainable communities movement. And then within a school or a school district that has a place-based education pedagogy or mindset, you're going to have farm-based education and service learning and environmental education and partnerships with historical societies and community-based art and music. So you're going to have all those things as components of a larger place-based education paradigm. And the big goal here is authentic environmental commitment and social agency are going to emerge when you involve kids in local projects where they can see that they're making a difference. And then this is the developmentally appropriate notion that as kids' world moves outward from the significant world, be it the home to the school to the neighborhood to the watershed, the curriculum in the grades should kind of follow that continuum. So that's why you do social studies, the solar system, later rather than first and second. The solar system in 5th and 6th grades, okay. And this is a superintendent in Maine who said it's a place-based education, it's the basket, it's not an egg in the basket, it's the paradigm. It's not the new program that you're trying to shoehorn in there along with the new math program. It's the whole way in which you think about school, community, and environment. So some examples, and I'll spend some time on some of these and skip over some other ones. But this is from Malden, Massachusetts, just north of Boston, a school called the Beebe Environmental and Health Sciences Magnet School, so public school. And so the kindergarten, making the alphabet book, is based on field trips to local places. So my name is Patty. I'm a police officer. I work at the police station, and I like pizza. It's probably not as good as the pizza at Sal's and Pepe's, but so the idea is that these drawings and writing come out of local field trips to local places. In the work we were done with a lot of schools, we create partnerships between a higher ed institution, in this case it's Antioch University New England where I work, and the school and a community organization. In this case it was the zoo, the Stone Zoo, which is right in Malden. And we have a zoo educator who is a half-time zoo educator and a half-time teacher in the school. And her job was to figure out ways in which the school curriculum could connect with the zoo. So in this case, the zoo had an eagle enclosure, and they wanted to have an eagle's nest that was at ground level so that when parents and kids come to the zoo, the kids can climb inside the eagle's nest so they can get a sense of how big an eagle's nest really is. So the zoo educator realized, okay, this connects with the bird curriculum in first grade. So the first graders go to the zoo and construct the eagle's nest. So it's kind of a service learning piece for the first graders. And as what happened as a result of this partnership that went on over the course of about 3 or 4 years is that the zoo saw increased membership from members in the Malden community. So that's a nice little example of how the curriculum starts to have an impact on the economic health of like a nonprofit. I'm going to skip that. This is a second grade curriculum at another Boston public school called the Young Achievers Science and Math School, and a school that does a lot of emphasis on place-based education and on social justice. So the first and second grade teachers do a unit on farm and food. They take the kids out to Lincoln to go to the orchard. While they're at the orchard, they encounter the Jamaican migrant farm workers, and the teachers realize, oh, this is a good teaching opportunity. We're gonna do something on migrant farm workers as part of the curriculum. And they actually, these posters down here at the bottom are posters about the issues that migrant farm workers face, and they got put in this local market. So there was shopper education going on as a result of the kids' work in school. And then the next year they said, well, we don't want to go way out to Lincoln. It's kind of a pain to get way out there. Let's find a farm and food thing near the school. So they found a homeless shelter that was doing urban gardening and aquaculture. So they said, we're going to go there to kind of see the farm and food thing. So they get to the homeless shelter, and then the children start asking questions about, why don't these moms and kids have a home to live in, and where are the dads? And the teachers realize, oh, I guess we should do something about homelessness. And so I say to the teachers, I say, well, homelessness is kind of heavy for first and second graders. And they say, homelessness is a regular part of these kids' lives. And we always have a homeless kid in our class. Any place we walk in the neighborhood, there's always homeless people on the street. So this is not like the rainforest, kind of not something that's disconnected from their lives. This is something that's part of their lives. And they do very interesting kinds of stuff like homelessness. One of the things that kids notice at the homeless shelter is that there's not any picture books for the kids. And so the teachers and the kids decide to do a picture book drive to collect picture books to then give to the homeless shelter. And so this is a perfect example of service learning or community service at the developmental level that kids get. They see that the kids don't have picture books. They collect the picture books. They give them to the homeless shelter. And I think this is way better than raising money to buy an acre of land in the Costa Rican rainforest. Even though I'm a big believer in protecting and preserving the Costa Rican rainforest, this kind of thing is the kind of thing we want kids doing. So, okay, well, this stuff is cute, but what about those pesky test scores, right? So we had a nice little case here where we had kids at Young Achievers who had been in kindergarten and first grade at Young Achievers and had been doing this kind of community-based approach versus kids that had done kindergarten someplace else and then were at Young Achievers for just 1 year. So we had a 2-year treatment group versus a 1-year treatment group, but both kids had 2 years of kindergarten and first grade. So on the writing assessments, the darker purple is the kids that were the 2-year group. So they scored higher on all the different writing assessments than the kids in the 1-year treatment group. And then these patterns have persisted since then. This was 7 or 8 years ago now. Some other examples. Butterfly garden, creating a butterfly garden on city land adjacent to the school. And then all that nice poster there, or that nice signage, that's all kid designed, kid drawn images of the butterflies, and the text is all kid written too. And this is a 3rd grade project where the teachers found that the 3rd graders were not scoring well on the Massachusetts curriculum tests on the questions that had to do with reading and interpreting bar graphs. So the solution, rather than more textbook drills on bar graphs, is to take kids to Fellsmere Park, about a 5-minute walk from the school, interview local community members about how they use the park, and they did this in the fall and the winter and the spring. And then the kids have to create posters with bar graphs showing how different community members use the park. So, you're taking the community resource as an opportunity to target teaching a skill. Here's another example of a similar kind of approach on Vinyl Haven. Vinyl Haven is one of Maine's 15 offshore communities. And Vinyl Haven was a granite quarry, a big granite quarry island for about a century. So the 3rd through 5th grade teachers are doing a unit on quarrying history. And they design a writing activity that's based on the main curriculum assessment that has a 35-minute writing prompt. So they have the children at the Historical Society sitting in the graveyard where the quarry workers are buried, and they have to choose a character, a quarry worker, and they have to choose one of the plots, a day in the life of a quarry worker, or a piece of granite is almost finished and something happens. They have to choose a plot, they have to choose one of the 3 quarries on the island, and then they have to do a story using the 35-minute framework that's going to be on the main curriculum assessment. So again, there doesn't need to be any disjuncture between using the local resource and the academic testing. A lot of examples in 4th grade of no student left indoors instead of left behind, right? Is having kids develop, kids and teachers together develop field guides to local campuses. Giving kids field guides, Peterson's field guide of trees, worthless. This is like overwhelming. But what you want are field guides that have just the 10 or 12 things that you can find on your schoolyard. And that gets kids into kind of understanding local flora. And I've got a great example that I want to get here when I can of a 4th grade field guide to the salt marsh at a Portland school. It looks just like any kind of field guide you'd buy for yourself. 5th grade, it's a wonderful kind of place-based education project where middle school kids went to this depot, an old train depot, and the first group of kids that went there was no furniture, so they needed to make benches. So they went to the Canterbury Shaker Village, found a bench design that they really liked, transferred it, and then built all the benches for the depot. And I love this quote about this was lots of work and the math was really hard. And kids will do hard math when they know that it's involved, related to something real. 6th graders. Teacher back on Vinyl Haven who's a volunteer monitor for the Department of Natural Resources doing red tide monitoring. So this is a kind of a classic community citizen science. activity. So she goes out and collects samples, assesses whether the organisms that create red tide are there, and then reports to the Department of Natural Resources. So she turns that into science curriculum for her 6th graders, so that the kids are going and doing the sample collection, looking for the organisms, having to fill out the forms that go into the state that then determines whether the state closes the mussel and clam flats or not. So kids being involved in real community citizen science. I'm going to skip over some of it. I'm going to do this one and then skip some other ones. This, back in Malden, this is a great example of what happens when you start to get mature place-based education going on. So in Malden, we've been working in the Malden schools for about 3 to 4 years, lots of connections between the school and the mayor's office. So the EPA determines that Malden stormwater does not meet EPA guidelines. And when that happens, the city is charged with creating a remediation plan. So the city creates a stormwater remediation committee. The committee turns to the school, says, you're the environmental school. One of the components of the plan is that we need to have a public education initiative about how citizens can improve the quality of stormwater. So the middle school teachers take on the task of fulfilling the EPA, this component of the EPA guidelines. So they teach a stormwater curriculum to the middle school kids. It integrates, I think it's science, social studies, and math. So let's see what you know about stormwater. So what are things that citizens can do to improve the quality of stormwater? Say it again?
Don't wash your cars at home.
Don't wash your cars at home? Yeah, that's good, yeah, because you don't want the phosphates from the washing your car going into the storm drains. What's another one?
Pick up your animal waste.
Yeah, picking up animal waste. Animal waste is a big component that creates stormwater pollution. Yeah. Yeah, so creating rain barrels or rain gardens that actually slow down and kind of create more percolation, so water's not going directly into storm drains. Some other things. What? Yeah, so pesticides and fertilizers on your lawn, especially right before rain events. And then there's another prominent one. Yeah, so motor oil and other kinds of stuff dumped into storm drains. So the kids learn about all this stuff, and then in teams they create stormwater education brochures, a whole lot of them. All the stormwater education brochures go to the stormwater committee. The stormwater committee chooses 5, mass produces them. They go out with the water bills. So the students have helped to create the public education piece. And so we like to say that, so in 5 years when EPA's stormwater is better, the schools should share some of the responsibility for having improved the stormwater. So perhaps we should not only be looking at test scores as the way to measure school success, but maybe we can start to look at other improvements in community health as measures of school improvement. So back to those pesky test scores. So what you've got here is a yellow line, that's the district, the Malden district. The green line, which are the state averages, and the red line, which are the BB average scores. And you'll find that in the life science testing, the BB scores start out the same as the district and the state, and then gradually diverge and become higher. In earth science, the BB scores are the same as the district and then exceed the district and become equivalent to the state. And then in the math scores, the same thing happens. The BB scores start out below the district and then exceed the district and become equivalent to the state averages. So increases in test scores that can, you can't claim causation, but they look like they correlate with the change in the approach to school. Do one other, I'm not going to talk about that. It's a good example, but I'm not going to talk about it. There's a lot of projects in Littleton, New Hampshire, a school we worked with for about 3 to 5 years. But what I want to talk about here is that we got to the point where the town manager said, there's not a town project I do where I don't first start with how can we involve the students. So you want community agencies and the mayor and the public works department to start thinking about, okay, so the school's a resource for solving community problems. And then this is the solid waste district manager. And in Littleton, they had been trying to pass a bond issue to close the dump. It costs a lot of money to close the dump appropriately, and the bond issue failed for a number of years. And then they got 8th graders involved in working with the engineering firm to do the education about why you should spend the big bucks to close the landfill. And that year, when they had the 8th graders working on it, that year the bond issue, the vote on the bond issue passed by one of the largest margins ever in the community. And then right around that time, Outside Magazine did one of those articles on the 10 most livable communities in the country, and Littleton was identified as one, and the school community partnerships were cited as one of the reasons. So if you get interested in this whole topic, this is the cover page for a PowerPoint that is available online that summarizes a lot of the studies on academic achievement and place-based education and environment-based education. I'm going to show you just a couple of pieces from this. So it's 10 different studies from across the country over the course of about 7 years. So here's one of the examples. This was done in Washington State, where the researcher compared 77 pairs of demographically similar schools. One school in the pair had an environment-based education approach, and the other school didn't. But the schools were paired so that they had similar student-teacher ratios, similar free and reduced lunch rates. So they're pretty similar schools, the difference being their approach towards education. And then they looked at performances on the Washington Assessment of Student Learning and the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. And they found that schools with systematic environmental education programs showed higher statistically significant test scores on standardized tests in math and literacy. We're not just talking science here. And the pattern persisted over 5 years of data. And then this is my current favorite example. This is a little school in western Maryland, right on the West Virginia border. So it feels a lot like a kind of a small Appalachian community. It is a small Appalachian community. It's a school. It's a K-5 school of about 100 kids, about a 90% free and reduced lunch rate. So a poor community. New principal about 10 years ago, who was interested in kind of community engagement, figuring out how to improve her school. And so they were doing a summer science program, and one of the kids said, why they were on this land adjacent to the school, and the kid said, why is this water orange? And the teacher said, well, let's figure that out. And it turned out that this is a big coal tailings dump, and this was acid mine drainage. So this kind of the water is percolating through and kind of picking up sulfuric acid, and then it's going into the local stream. And so the teacher and the school decides, okay, we're going to do something about this. So they work with the Department of Natural Resources. There's a big acid mine drainage remediation program in Maryland. And they do that, and in the process they create an environmental education laboratory on this property that used to be a coal tailings dump. And then they did this in conjunction with West Virginia Science Center, and the principal said, this is great. The kids love this. This is really working. Let's figure out how to do more of this. So over the course of the next 8 years, they do a comprehensive set of place-based education programs. History, a playground based on the history of the community, and trout in the classroom, and a big bird studies program in the 4th and 5th grade. And the principal is remarkable at getting all the teachers involved and all the community members involved. In 2010, of the 874 elementary schools in Maryland, this little elementary school had the highest pass rate on the Maryland School Assessment. This was the highest performing school in Maryland. Now you can think about, Maryland, Annapolis, and Bethesda, and the Washington suburbs. So Maryland's got a lot of, kind of fairly wealthy communities. And this school was one of the highest performing schools. And in addition to that, this is a wonderful Baltimore Sun article that looked at a bunch of these high performing schools in Maryland. And where they say, far from teaching to the test, these top schools are succeeding because they're interested in the whole child, principals say. So instead of teaching to the test, this drill and kill mindset, these schools are doing what we know to be good education, and their kids are performing well. So a couple of other examples from around the country. A Real School Gardens program in Fort Worth, which is now expanded out into Dallas and Arlington, works to get a garden in every public school and then do professional development for how teachers can use the garden. The blue line on this chart is the average pass rate on the Texas science curriculum test in the schools with gardens. And then the red line is the average pass rate on the schools without gardens in Fort Worth. So gradually, as these schools get integrated into the curriculum, the kids are doing better on the science curriculum test. And then another, for instance, at a Los Angeles public school where they had a natural area, and they started doing professional development on how to use the natural area as part of the science curriculum. So 3 years ago, the school's standardized test scores in science showed that 9% of the fifth graders were proficient and none were advanced, and then 3 years later, 55% of the fifth graders tested as proficient or advanced. So in all these cases, in schools, you'll hear principals in school would say, well, that project-based education or taking the kids outside sounds fun, but we gotta make sure we keep our test scores up. And we keep trying to say, there is another way. You can improve the test scores by doing this kind of curriculum. And then there's this other piece that we mentioned right back in the beginning about agency and democracy. So this is a great study, an old study, but a wonderful illustration. This is about a teacher who was a high school teacher teaching one of 5 different sections of a high school class. But his section, he used the kids working on the city's master plan as a core part of the high school social studies curriculum. So designing the master plan and then implementing the master plan. And then 30 years later, researchers went and looked at the students that had been in these high school classes, comparing the students in the class that were in the master planning class versus the students in all the other sections. And this was one of those random assignment situations. In other words, kids did not choose into any specific section of the class, they're randomly assigned. So the kids that were in the master planning class didn't choose to be there. And when they looked at these kids 30 years later, last lines, over the intervening 30 years, members of the planning project were 4 times more likely than non-members to have belonged to volunteer groups and twice as likely to have been officers in civic and service organizations. So the message is, if you give students the opportunity to be involved in civic projects when they're in school, it can help to shape their disposition towards civic engagement in their post-school life. Here's just again, if you get interested in this stuff, this is a nice 2-pager on student gains from place-based education. This is a great thing to give to principals and school board members about, yes, we want to do this stuff and this is why. And this is another nice piece that summarizes a lot of what I've talked about. Lots of pretty pictures, lots of good quotes from teachers and principals and mayors about the value of this kind of approach. And this stuff is all available online. And so to summarize, when you use curriculum that connects students to the real world, test scores can improve. Students can learn to become stewards of their natural and cultural resources. And students and citizens can become collaborators in community improvement. So, I have a good quote here for the ending. Yeah, so I want to go back to that notion that, of the farmer's market, is that what we need to do is think about schools as, cultivating plants that we want to grow. And that notion that, testing is kind of like pulling plants out and looking at their roots and then sticking the plants back in the ground. And, you can do that just so many times before you kill the plant. And so instead of this kind of constant testing, we really need to be thinking about cultivation of the plants so that kids as plants are going to grow up to be active citizens. I was thinking of talking about the Finnish schools, but I'm not going to, that's another topic. So anyway, the way in which we cultivate kids is to support this kind of what we've known all along to be good, healthy education, and we should not allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by the testing mindset. So I'm done. Thanks.
Questions, please feel free just to call them out. And I think some people did see the movie last week of School's Out. So if you have questions about that, maybe you want to...
I thought of showing that. We could still show it, but...
I mean, maybe people want to see part of it. It's amazing, I think.
How are you feeling? Richie, ready to stretch, or do you want to see a quick...
It's short, right?
What's 6 minutes?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
6 minutes. Okay, wait a second. So I need to kind of frame it a little bit. So I'm working a lot. One of the things I'm working on right now is of nature preschools and forest kindergartens. So this wonderful movement that's some in the United States, started in Europe in the 70s and 80s, of kindergartens where kids are outdoors most of the time. A lot of these forest kindergartens don't have any indoor facilities. Kids are outdoors year-round. A great example of early childhood place-based education. And I'm starting a new program at Antioch, New England for training people in this approach. So this is a piece of a longer movie about a forest kindergarten in Switzerland.
This is a forest kindergarten. It is a public school. The children, they can choose where they want to be. Perhaps they want to play by the river, so they can play by the river. So is the box moving on the left? So is one over. This is our coming up. They only get in the building when they were going. Work was nice, they have a woman but I spent the whole day with the kids, and that was the time I saw the kids were even allowed to play with the knives and swords, and I thought I was shocked. I couldn't even move. I don't think I would trust my kids Arriba aqui da nada.
To play plastic things. New research results say there are connections between gross motoric developments and brain developments. And if a child in early years can move a lot and in different ways, there is also the brain developing in a way that later on the child can profit from this. For example, in mathematics.
The research is very clear that children learn skills outdoors that they cannot learn inside. One of the schools that my own daughter went to, they eliminated recess. And the reason they said they eliminated recess is that the children get along better, you know, that there's less fighting, which is exactly the opposite, because what we really saw were children bullying other children and being mean to each other because they didn't have the opportunity to solve those problems outdoors during the playground time.
In the last 20 years, I have more and more children who are going to a forest kindergarten or Wald kindergarten, as we say here in Switzerland. And I must say that the kids have much more self-confidence, and actually I haven't seen kids with a hyperactivity disorder in a Wald kindergarten, and I have seen a lot of kids with a hyperactivity disorder in the ordinary kindergarten.
I'm a teacher myself, and I've been in these regular school systems forever. My biggest fear is that the school, with the structure and the schedule and the appointments and the testing and the pressure, they're stopping the kids from actually becoming what they're meant to be. I found that the forest kindergarten is really, so far, the only place in regular school that I've come across where I think that's really a place where they still have this freedom.
So that's part of a longer, that's a little clip of a longer film. There's a lot of people look at those and see the risk elements there. I was at a conference working with play workers in Wales a few years ago, and they had a similar kind of video in which there's a scene of kids around a fire and it's dusk and there's no adults and the kids are throwing paper into the fire and it's catching fire and going up and kids are getting burned and I said to the guy who created the film afterwards, I said, boy, the fire scene made me a little nervous. He said, the fire scene is in there because we use it as a litmus test for assessing whether somebody's going to be a good play worker or not. If they're uncomfortable with the fire scene, we know they're not going to be good play workers. So, yeah, so the whole attitude towards fire and risk, as you could see here, is very different in Europe. And just been talking to a playground designer who was in Berlin recently, and the insurance company that insures a lot of people in Berlin has found through their actuarial studies that adults who had active, riskier childhoods have fewer accidents in adulthood and therefore file fewer insurance claims. So therefore, the insurance companies are encouraging playground designers to design higher risk elements on playgrounds because in the long run, it's going to be better for them. So this whole notion about what we should have kids do and what kids should do, and this notion of what some people are calling safety, is that we've got to have this risk-benefit approach towards kids' play And, you know, I think this is exactly, from a place-based education perspective, this is what young kids, what's really healthy for life. I'm always a little worried about people that say, well, they're going to, in second grade, it's going to be dreary. So we have to, in first grade, we have to have it be dreary so they be prepared for second grade being dreary. I would at least prefer them to have a happy first grade, and then maybe more, you know, stalwart when they have to deal with the dreariness of second grade. So, yes, you want to kind of, you kind of want to get the whole school buy-in, and it's a tough process. You know, this is doing things that are contrary to the social norm at this point is like swimming upstream against the current. So, you know, if you want to try and do this, you have to accept the fact that it's tough, and there's going to be people who are going to be criticize what you're trying to do. So you have to be willing to articulate why you're doing what you're doing, and you know, try and recruit parents as supporters or other colleagues as supporters. So I keep wanting to know. You have to commit the Margaret Mead quote. Who can quote the Margaret Mead thing about, you know, never doubt that one is right? I can never quite get it. So, can anybody do it? Yeah?
Is that the try sleeping with a mosquito in your bedroom?
No. This is not that one. So this is the one about never doubt that one person can change the world. In fact, it's usually big changes are caused by one person that starts to do what they believe in. Say what? Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
Just to back on that, I watched it in my home district. The power in those tests,
Yeah.
that's really, and when you go to your board of education or you go to administrator, that they need that information.
Exactly.
The feeling that seems so obvious to us,
right.
You know, when they see the facts, see the statistics, that really does help to get their attention.
And that I've spent a lot of time trying to, do the research and pull together all the other studies around the country so there's a body of information about this stuff.
So just to expand on that, do you think people are listening? I mean, do you feel more positive that they may someday get there than you did maybe a few years ago?
That's why I start with that William James quote about the molecular forces.
Yeah.
I'm okay. Is it going to become national educational policy? I doubt it. Can we make schools better in little, district or state by state? Yes, I think we can. So I'm happy with that. And it's like the kid on the beach where there's all the all the starfish up on the shore, and they're going to all die. And the child's going down the beach and throwing them one by one back in the water. And the adult says, "This is, you can't make a difference here. There are zillions of starfish." And the child says, "Well, it makes a difference for this starfish." So that's how I feel about it. Regardless of whether it's going to become national policy, I think it's still worth doing.